I always thought of prayer as this fixed thing. Like it's been the same for centuries.
Hmm.
But digging into excerpts from the Urantia book, specifically paper 91, well, it really got me thinking differently. It's like this deep dive into how prayer, this really universal thing, right? Talking to something bigger, how it's actually evolved over time.
And what's really fascinating is that this whole talking to something bigger thing, well, it might actually predate, like, even having a defined something bigger to talk to.
Wait, you saying prayer like came before God's?
Yeah.
That's kind of wild when you think about it.
It is. And that's exactly what the text suggests. Think about it like wishing on a star or crossing your fingers for luck even, or what is it, knocking on wood. These are all like instinctive expressions of hope, this desire to influence the unknown. And the book actually calls these very early forms of prayer almost like wish me luck kind of thing, except it wasn't just, individual wishes. Early humans would often involve their whole families and tribes.
So less dear God, more like a collective. Everyone send good vibes.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. These early prayers, they weren't like solely focused on personal wants either. The text mentions the Toda tribe as an example. And they still pray in this like collective list defined way, but it's actually considered a step backward, not some pure ideal form of prayer.
Okay, I gotta ask. A step backward. Why? It sounds like they're, keeping it real, sticking to the basics.
Yeah. Well, the text, it argues that it's a regression, because it's missing a key element. There's no connection to ethics, to like the well-being of the entire community. See, early prayers, they were often super intertwined with, things vital to the tribe's survival, a good harvest, a successful hunt, things like that. Praying for things that would benefit everyone.
Right. Praying for rain wasn't about you being thirsty. It was about the whole community surviving. The collective good as much as anything individual.
Exactly. And this is actually where we see that next stage in how prayer evolved. Because as humans started to develop, more complex beliefs, imagining spirits, honoring their ancestors, well, those figures, they become the ones they're praying to.
So it's like our minds invented the other line on the phone call, so to speak. Instead of just hoping out into the void, we created someone to direct those hopes towards.
Exactly. And that's where prayer, it takes on this whole new level of power, I think. Because instead of just like hoping for luck from random forces, now there's a standard, there's an ideal, something to try and live up to. Even if it starts with just, ancestor worship, it sets a kind of bar.
That's so true. Think about it. Even today, the people we admire, role models, right? A historical figure, maybe your parents, even like a fictional character. We look at them and try to, embody those best parts.
Yeah, it's the same concept at play, you see, this alter ego idea in prayer. It's at what we focus on, who we believe in. It ends up shaping who we become.
So we've gone from, wishing on good luck to like inventing the big divine hotline, right? But it makes you wonder, like, what were people even praying for back then? Was it all harps and clowns, or was it something a little more practical, you think?
Haha, that's a great question. And it's actually where this whole evolution of prayer thing gets really interesting. See, the text is very clear, early prayer, super rooted in the material world.
Okay, so like what kind of things are we talking here?
Oh, we're talking good harvests, plentiful hunts, protection from, storms and stuff. They're the things that were really directly tied to their day-to-day survival.
Okay, well, that's relatable, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want the good stuff?
Yeah.
It does seem a little different from how we tend to think about prayer now. Like it's this path to higher consciousness,
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. But here's the thing. This is where it gets kind of nuanced. Because the text actually argues that this whole materialistic focus, it actually served a purpose. Like, even if their idea of the divine was still kind of basic, it encouraged them to actually work for the things they were praying for.
So wait, you're saying even if the prayer itself was about like wanting stuff, it still had this positive ripple effect. I'm curious, how so?
Think of it like this. If you believe that a good harvest, it all depends on, the favor of some god, some spirit, well, you're probably going to put in a lot of effort to actually plant, tend, harvest those crops really carefully.
Right.
Even if, deep down you're like, please, God, just make the crops grow. It still gets you moving, right? It's driving action, even if the thinking behind it is maybe a little off.
Okay, I'm starting to see what you mean. So, like, the motivation might come from wanting more stuff, but the result is still positive for everyone. It makes people try harder. It pushes them toward a common goal.
Exactly. And it all ties back to this idea of evolution. It's a process, right? We go from like, gimme, gimme, to, make me better, guide me, but it takes time. Prayer, it seems like it kind of evolves along with us, with like human consciousness in general.
It's like, I don't know, graduating from just wishing for that giant pile of candy to being like, okay, but also give me the wisdom to make healthier choices.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Exactly. And this is where the text really highlights this crucial turning point. It's moving towards what it calls ethical prayer.
Ethical prayer. So, like, it's not enough to just pray for your own stuff anymore. There's a bigger picture now.
Exactly. It's about, moving beyond just your personal wish list and like really recognizing the needs of others. The text really makes a point of this, that true ethical prayer, it means accepting that we're all connected. It's less about what about me and more like what about us.
Less my problems fix them, and more about, I don't know, stepping up, taking responsibility,
Yeah.
right, for the whole human thing.
Yeah, exactly. And they give this really like relatable example. Think about a friend going through a rough time.
Right.
Saying a prayer for them. That's awesome, obviously, but it can't just be that, right? Like you got to actually be there for them too, offer support, show up, do the practical stuff too.
So it's this idea that your actions have to, like, line up with your prayers, put those good intentions into practice, really make it real.
Exactly. It's about understanding that prayer, it's not some magic wand to just like erase all your problems. It's about finding the strength and the guidance to go out there and actually do something good, make a change.
Which I think is fascinating because it really pushes back on that idea of prayer being passive. Like this is about actively using that connection to something bigger to actually do good.
Right. And that's actually where the text gets, I think, really insightful. It really tackles this head on. It even talks about the limitations of prayer.
Limitations that you get, like, it can't just magically fix everything. I'll admit sometimes part of me still kind of wants to believe in that quick fix.
Well, yeah, and I get that. But the text, it's saying that prayer can't defy reality, right? You can't just like pray away a hurricane or, I don't know, win the lottery magically or something. And actually holding on to that idea, it can really backfire. It can lead to like feeling let down, hopeless even, when those prayers, well, they don't get answered the way we expect.
So if it's not about getting a free pass or special treatment, then what's the point? What can prayer really do for us when things are tough? So if prayer isn't about getting a free pass or, bending the rules of the universe, then what's the point? Like, what can it really do for us when things are tough?
Well, the text, it really emphasizes the like psychological, even spiritual impact that prayer can have, even if it doesn't actually, change what's happening around you. It's more about, I think, tapping into something deeper within ourselves.
Right.
Connecting with this sense that there's something bigger than just us, And I think finding the strength to like actually deal with whatever life throws our way.
So less about asking for an easy life and more about, I don't know, finding that inner strength to just get through it all.
Yeah, exactly. And that alone, like just that shift in perspective, it can be really powerful because instead of just focusing on, what's going wrong around you, prayer can help us kind of look inward, and helps us cultivate things like compassion, understanding, forgiveness, the things that actually help us become like stronger, more resilient versions of ourselves.
Yeah. That's interesting because I think, a lot of times we think of prayer as something we do when things are bad, right? Like a last resort kind of thing. But what you're talking about is something, I don't know, almost more fundamental, like something that can impact how we live every day.
Absolutely. And I think it's about making a conscious effort to like nurture that connection, to something bigger. And that's something, it doesn't even have to be, some specific deity or anything. It could be a higher power, sure. But it could also be like our own inner wisdom, our intuition, even just, a sense of shared humanity. I think it's the act of connecting that really matters.
Like tapping into this universal human need, right?
Mm-hmm.
For meaning, for a sense of purpose, however that looks in our own lives. And it makes me think back to something you mentioned earlier about the limitations of prayer. Can we, can we go back to that for a sec?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things the text really emphasizes is that while prayer can be a really powerful tool, it's not magic, right? Like it can't break the laws of reality. Like you can't get out of that speeding ticket just by praying, and you can't just like wish away sickness or hardship or whatever. It doesn't quite work like that.
So it's about accepting that, prayer is powerful, but it's not a magic wand, right? Mm-hmm. It's more about, how we find strength within those challenges, how we keep things in perspective.
Exactly. And the text, it actually puts this in a really interesting way. It says that, and I quote, Prayer is not a technique of escape from conflict, but rather a stimulus to growth in the very face of conflict.
Wow, yeah. That really kind of hits home, I think. So it's not about wishing the hard stuff away. It's about finding the strength, I don't know, even the wisdom to get through it, and then we grow from it on the other side.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about facing those challenges head on, using them really as opportunities to learn and grow, to become more resilient, more understanding, more compassionate, ultimately to become, well, more fully ourselves,
It was a journey, right? It's not something that just happens overnight. And it makes this whole conversation about the evolution of prayer even more, I don't know, more relevant somehow. Like prayer itself evolves with us, right?
I think so, yeah. And honestly, I think that's what makes this whole exploration so fascinating, because as we change and evolve as humans, so does our understanding of prayer and the role it can play in our lives.
Absolutely. Well, I think as we wrap up this deep dive into, well, I guess you could call it the surprising evolution of prayer, we're left with a pretty big question. What if, instead of just this last resort, what if we thought about prayer as a source of strength? Something we use to grow, to connect with something bigger than ourselves, something to think about, right?
Yeah.